Hi, I'm Rowena. And this isn't just a story about being called infertile by my sister in front of my entire family. It's about how they all nodded along like it was truth. My parents said I'd cursed the bloodline. My seat at the table, pushed to the corner. My name in the will, erased. But the silence I gave them that night wasn't surrender. It was the sound of something bigger starting. Ever been betrayed by the people who raised you, and still expected to thank them for dinner? I hadn't stepped foot in Charleston in nearly 5 months. The air smelled the same, sweet jasmine laced with something heavier, something I'd always mistaken for nostalgia. Now I knew better. That scent wasn't memory. It was warning. When Vera called, she used words like reset, fresh start, and healing. Said the family needed to mend, and wouldn't it be nice if we all came together before Easter? I agreed, not because I believed her, but because I needed to see for myself if anything had changed. Foolish maybe, but necessary. The house looked the same, white pillars too polished to feel warm, a porch lined with rocking chairs that had never been rocked. The kind of southern charm you see in magazines, not in real life. I paused at the gate, saw Vera's wine glass already half empty through the front window. I almost turned back. Almost. Inside, everything was choreographed. The long table was set like a catalog photo, linen napkins, heirloom silver, name cards. Mine said Rowena in perfect calligraphy, placed alone at the corner. Not next to anyone, not even Milas, who wasn't invited. Vera greeted me with her usual cool smile. "Look who found time for family," she said, brushing one arm across my shoulder, like it was meant to feel affectionate. It didn't. I noticed how Sylvia nodded approvingly from her seat, and Donovan, Dad, gave a single nod and returned to his scotch. Dinner started with toasts and small talk. A few rounds of remember when, always conveniently skipping memories where I had mattered. Vera leaned across the table often, performing her role like it was a stage. Bright laughter, exaggerated sympathy when someone mentioned work stress or college acceptances. I sipped water. I counted the ceiling beams. I reminded myself to breathe. And then, right as the server poured champagne into crystal flutes, Vera stood. "To family," she said, raising her glass. Everyone echoed it. She waited for quiet. "To legacy, and to those of us who can actually continue it." There was a pause. Her eyes landed on me. "Some of us are just infertile burdens." The clink of cutlery stopped. I heard someone inhale too sharply. The air changed, got denser. Forks froze midair, mouths hung open. My hands stayed in my lap, my glass untouched. I didn't speak, I didn't flinch. But inside, I could hear my own heartbeat like it was slamming against my ribs, trying to get out. I looked to Sylvia. Her hand trembled slightly on the stem of her glass, but she didn't speak, just shifted in her seat. Donovan cleared his throat. "Well," he muttered, "it's time she faced facts." That did it. Not Vera's words, cruel as they were, but that quiet, resigned agreement from the man who once braided my hair before church, who once told me I was the best thing he'd ever done. I picked up my napkin slowly, folded it neatly, and placed it on the edge of my plate. My voice came out calm, controlled. Too quiet, maybe, but steady. "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing. "I hope your legacy tastes as bitter as this wine." I didn't wait for a reaction. Didn't need to. I walked past the empty hallway, past the portraits of ancestors I apparently dishonored by existing. The porch lights flickered behind me as I stepped into the heavy Charleston night. I left that night with silence in my mouth and a storm in my chest. The morning after that dinner, my apartment felt colder than usual. Charleston's spring light crept through half-closed blinds, casting long lines across my floor like prison bars. The coffee I'd brewed yesterday still sat on the counter, now lukewarm and bitter. I took one sip and poured the rest down the sink. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the clothes from the night before. My phone buzzed beside me. The screen lit up with messages. 6 unread texts, 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails. I didn't move. The word infertile hadn't left my ears. It echoed like someone had whispered it into the walls, into the floorboards, into the marrow of who I thought I was. Did I bring this on myself? I asked out loud, though no one was there to answer. Eventually, I picked up the phone. The first message was from Sylvia. Let's talk later. Please understand, Vera was just being honest. She didn't mean it to hurt you. I read it again, then again, waiting for the apology that never came. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped. The second message was from Donovan. Family is about truth. Maybe this is what you needed to hear to move on. That one cut deeper. It wasn't Vera's words that destroyed me. It was their silence, their quiet nods, their refusal to look at me when she said what she did. I sat with that, with all of it, with the familiar ache of trying to earn love I should never have had to fight for. I set the phone down and stood, pacing the apartment. I tried to clean up, dishes, shoes by the door, a blanket that had fallen from the couch. My hands moved, but my mind stayed in that room, at that table, under the weight of 13 eyes that didn't blink when I was erased. Buzz. Another message came in. It was from Sylvia again, but this time, it was different. She needs to feel the pressure. She needs to know she has no place if she can't carry the family forward. I froze. My stomach tightened. I reread it, hoping it was out of context, hoping it was to someone else. Then I saw it, at the top. To Vera, Cece, me. She'd meant to send it only to Vera, but she hadn't checked the thread. That was the moment everything tilted. It wasn't just an uncomfortable dinner. It wasn't a passing comment or a misunderstanding. This was coordinated. This was strategy. This was them. I dropped the phone. Not on purpose. It just slipped from my fingers. Hit the rug and bounced. I sank to the floor beside it. Not in weakness. Just impact. A memory surfaced. I was 10. Crying because Vera had told everyone at church that I still slept with a stuffed animal. Sylvia had pulled me aside and said, "Rowena, you have to learn to be stronger. Vera's just more mature." And then another, 18, just home from college. I told Donovan I wanted to work in women's health, not the family business. He said, "That sounds sweet, but real impact comes from legacy." Every time I stepped out of their mold, they trimmed me back. They never wanted me to fight. They wanted me to vanish quietly. I don't know how long I sat there, back against the couch, eyes fixed on the wall. An hour? Maybe more. The room was so quiet I could hear the wind pressing against the windows. Eventually, I picked up the phone. The screen was still lit. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the blinds and looked outside. Cars passed. Someone jogged by with a golden retriever. Life went on. It always did. I gripped the phone tighter, like it might bite or break or bless me. Who knew at this point? "If I'm no one to them," I whispered, voice steady for once, "then I have nothing to lose." 2 Sundays later, I was making tea in my apartment when the ping of a new email pulled me back to my phone. My hands were still damp from rinsing the mug, and I nearly dropped the phone when I saw the subject line, "Final draft for Sunday's inheritance division. Please confirm before printing." It had been forwarded by accident from a cousin who apparently hadn't noticed my address was still in the thread. My thumb hovered over the screen. I tapped, and the message opened. The list of recipients popped up first: Donovan, Sylvia, Vera, and several other relatives I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Their names appeared under bold titles: executor, primary beneficiary, co-trustee. I scrolled down, searching. My name wasn't there, not even in fine print. Not as a footnote, not under alternate recipients, not once. I didn't feel rage, not in that moment. What settled over me was something quieter, deeper, like a cold weight pressing against my chest. I leaned back into the couch and stared at the screen. It wasn't just that they'd forgotten me. That might have been forgivable. This was intentional, precise. I had known since the night of the dinner that something had shifted. But this? This confirmed it had been in motion for a while. I sat with the silence for a long while, then placed the phone face down on the table. I stood, walked over to the bookshelf, and pulled out an old photo album, one Sylvia had given me when I moved into my first apartment. I flipped through it slowly. There I was, in birthday party group shots, always at the edge, in family Christmas photos, tucked behind chairs, never at the center, never held, always next to a plant or the dog or some inanimate object. And there it was again, the feeling I'd been trained into. I'd grown up thinking I was easygoing, low maintenance, the calm one. What I really was forgotten, taught to make space, to take the leftovers, and to smile while doing it. I returned to my phone and opened a new message in the thread. I typed slowly. "Hi all, just noticed I wasn't included in the draft. Was that intentional?" No anger, no accusation, just a question. The reply came within an hour. Vera, of course. "Let's discuss in person. It's sensitive." Then Sylvia followed, as predictable as clockwork. "You haven't been involved in family affairs lately. We assumed you'd want space." Space. They always said I wanted space, as if I hadn't been reaching for them for years, as if I hadn't tried to show up, only to be met with walls. This wasn't a slip. This was strategy. It wasn't that they'd forgotten me. They had removed me. I sat at my dining table, breathing through a dull throb at the back of my head. There was no yelling, no tears, just this quiet understanding that something foundational had cracked years ago, and I'd been patching over it with polite smiles and short visits ever since. Later that afternoon, I called Maelis. She was the only one left who didn't speak to me like I was an obligation. We met at a small cafe that smelled like oranges and old books. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't press. She just waited. "They're carving me out," I finally said, stirring my tea long after the sugar had dissolved, like I never belonged. Maelis looked at me with the kind of softness that doesn't pity. "Maybe you always knew." "Maybe," I whispered. "I was never really in it." She nodded, then reached into her tote bag and pulled out a faded green notebook. I recognized the cover immediately, our high school yearbook notes journal, the one we used to pass between classes. "You should see what Vera wrote about you back then," she said. "It's time you remembered what they wanted you to forget." I didn't want to look, but I had to. The rain had started just after dusk. I sat cross-legged on the couch, notebook open across my lap, Maelis's words still ringing in my head. The green fabric cover was familiar, our old high school journal, worn at the edges but intact. I hadn't touched it in over a decade. The pages felt heavier than I remembered. Each one brought back some hallway moment, some passing note, some petty drama we'd once thought defined our lives. Until I got to the page with Vera's handwriting. "Rowena doesn't fit the family mold. She's just background." There it was. The root, in her own hand, in her own words. She'd been rehearsing my erasure since we were teenagers. The thunder outside cracked, low and steady. I flipped the page again, half hoping for something different, something redeeming. But it was more of the same, Vera chronicling every flaw I'd ever had, as if collecting evidence for a case she planned to present later. I stared at her words until they blurred. I hadn't cried since that dinner. I didn't now either. But something else shifted. Something old. A quiet part of me that had long believed maybe I was just imagining it, that maybe I was too sensitive, finally let go of the doubt. They meant to do this. They always had. I set the notebook down and reached for my phone, mostly out of reflex. A notification sat at the top of the screen. Forwarded message from my cousin Jen. The subject line read, "Just FYI, thought you should see this." I opened it. An internal company email, sent from Vera's executive assistant to a small group of board members. Near the bottom, in a thread between Vera and Sylvia, one line glowed. "She'll walk away. It's who she is. If she stays quiet, we win." I blinked, reread it. Then again. They hadn't just planned for me to disappear. They were counting on it, banking on my silence, treating it like an asset in their PR plan. My chest went tight. I gripped the phone, knuckles pale. The betrayal wasn't new, but the clarity was. A second later, another notification appeared. A tag on social media. I clicked it. There, front and center, was my face. A photo from last year's spring garden event. I was crouched beside Vera's daughter, helping her with a flower crown. The caption read, "The women of our family, committed to nurturing the next generation." I felt sick. My hands trembled as I took a screenshot. Then I typed, "Vera, please remove my image from your company's materials. I didn't consent to be part of this." Minutes later, her reply came in. Short, sharp. "It's just a photo, Rowena. Try not to make everything about you." I laughed. Not out loud. The kind of laugh that doesn't reach your face. The kind that hurts behind your teeth. She was still doing it, painting me as dramatic, unstable, selfish. But this time, I had the paper trail. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Title, Records of Exclusion, for legal use. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about documenting what they were so used to hiding behind charm and etiquette. I added the email thread, the screenshots, the photo. I attached a digital scan of Vera's notebook quote, dated and initialed. Then I paused. I thought about every moment I'd stayed silent, every time I'd swallowed truth to keep the peace. If they wanted silence, I whispered, they should have earned it. Outside, lightning split the sky. I hit save. On the first line of the document, I typed, "The bloodline they protect isn't the one that raised me." It had been 5 days since I sent the message about the photo. No reply from Vera, no follow-up from Sylvia. Just silence, the kind that echoes louder than a slammed door. Then, Sunday morning, my phone rang. Sylvia. "Would you like to have tea with me?" she asked, her voice too polished, too calm. I should have said no. But some part of me, a remnant of the daughter who once craved approval, said yes. We met at a historic garden cafe downtown. One of those manicured places with white iron tables and antique floral china. It looked exactly like somewhere Sylvia would take a guest, not her child. She was already seated when I arrived, stirring her tea with the kind of deliberate grace she'd always admired in others, but rarely practiced herself. "Rowena," she said, looking up, "you look tired." I smiled without teeth. "It's been that kind of week." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Let's talk." The heirloom ring was still on my finger. I had worn it out of habit, not loyalty. It had belonged to my grandmother, then to Sylvia, then to me, as if lineage could be boiled down to jewelry. "I was hoping," I said, sitting, "this might be a real conversation." Sylvia poured herself more tea. "I want peace, Rowena, that's all. I think we've let things spiral too far." I waited, but she didn't say anything else. "No apology?" I asked. She dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin. "I'm sorry you feel hurt." Of course. The most impersonal kind of apology there is. I leaned forward. "You didn't just hurt me, you helped erase me, and you did it with your silence." Sylvia's eyes didn't flinch. "Rowena, you've always been emotional. You take things too personally." "That's convenient," I said. "You keep labeling me sensitive, so you never have to look at what you did." She didn't respond right away, just refilled her cup. Then, with the gentlest cruelty I'd ever heard, she said, "Maybe it's just a genetic fault. Some people weren't meant to carry forward." Everything in me went still. Not shock, not even anger. Just the final breath before something breaks. I reached for the ring, slid it off slowly. My fingers felt lighter immediately. I placed it on the saucer in front of her. It made the softest clink. "This belonged to a family I'm no longer part of," I said. My voice didn't shake. "You've lost a daughter, not a defect." Sylvia looked down at the ring, but didn't touch it. Her hands stayed folded. I waited one beat longer than I needed to, just to see if she'd say anything. She didn't. I stood and walked out. The sun had started to peek through the clouds. There was a bench just outside the gates of the cafe, and I sat there for a while, letting the breeze settle my skin. My hands shook, but I didn't cry. I texted my Elise. "You were right. They were never going to hear me." It didn't feel like giving up. It felt like letting go. That evening, after I'd made myself dinner and cleaned up, I pulled out a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I didn't write to Sylvia or Vera. I wrote to Janice, my lawyer. I kept it simple. "I'm ready to move forward. Let's proceed." Then I folded the letter, sealed the envelope, and slid it into the outgoing mail bin at the corner of my building. They wanted me quiet. They were about to learn what happens when I stop holding back. The rain had been falling since just before noon, thick and steady, like it had no intention of letting up. From my window, Charleston looked soaked through, rooftops glistening, sidewalks reflective like glass. I sat at my desk, every lamp in the apartment glowing against the gray outside. I had the folder open on my screen, notebooks, screenshots, email chains, the timeline I'd pieced together across weeks of digging, watching, listening. And now, the letter. "To whom it may concern," I typed, pausing after the first line. My hands hovered above the keyboard. I looked over at the printed medical report beside me. I'd gone in quietly, without telling anyone. Just to know, just to be sure. No signs of infertility. Reproductive health normal. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. I attached the report. Then the photo Vera had used in her PR campaign. Then the internal emails about the inheritance. The threads that stitched their version of the truth together. Every one of them tugging against mine. The last page I scanned in was a screenshot from Vera's assistant, who had foolishly forwarded the wrong message once before. This one was bolder, from Vera herself. "She's bluffing. We stick to the story." I hit save. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not in war paint, but with intention. Slacks, a pressed blouse, a watch I hadn't worn in months. I didn't want to look like I was showing up to fight. I wanted to look like someone who had already won. Downtown was sticky and humid by the time I stepped into Janice's office. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a calm expression that didn't flinch when I handed over the folder. She didn't speak for the first few minutes as she read. Then she leaned back in her chair, hands folded across her stomach. "You've got a solid claim here," she said slowly. "But more than that, this is a statement." I nodded. "It's not about getting the money. It's about showing them I know exactly what they did, and that I'm not going to pretend anymore." Janice smiled slightly, then said, "Let's make sure they understand that loud and clear." The letter went out that afternoon. Certified mail, one to Vera, one to Sylvia, one to Donovan. I didn't expect a reply, but one came anyway, accidentally, of course. Vera's assistant again. Maybe she was careless, maybe she wasn't. The email landed in my inbox just after 6 p.m. "She's bluffing. We stick to the story." Sent from Vera to Sylvia and her legal advisor. 10 minutes later, another popped up. This one from Sylvia, meant only for Vera. "Call me. This could get ugly." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That evening, I checked the Family Foundation's website. The homepage banner, which had once featured me holding Vera's daughter, was gone. All photos of me, gone. The About section had been edited. The annual garden brunch, the same one I used to host with my own hands, was postponed indefinitely. A cousin texted me out of the blue. "Are you okay? Just heard about the inheritance mess. I'm not picking sides. I just hope you're all right." I didn't reply to that either. They were pulling back, not because they were sorry, but because they were afraid. That night, I made dinner. sat on the couch with a book I'd read 3 times already, and for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like I was floating outside my body. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was a link. A local gossip blog. Cheap-looking, barely credible, but loud. The headline read, "Estranged Daughter's Legal Crusade. Is it just revenge?" Below was a blurry photo of me outside Janice's office, taken that morning. The caption, "Sources say the former heiress has launched a legal campaign against her own family after being passed over for inheritance. Is it personal or just petty?" I stared at it for a long time. The rain tapped against the window like an old friend. I didn't start this for revenge, but they sure made it personal. It was a warm Sunday morning when I stopped by the bakery on King Street. I'd gone out for fresh air, thinking maybe a scone and a walk could break the mental fog that had settled over me after the legal notice was sent. The place was packed, every table buzzing with quiet conversation and the clink of coffee cups. I stood by the display case, waiting for my order, when I heard it. "Poor Vera," one woman said softly behind me. "After what happened with the baby, and now her sister suing her?" My stomach dropped. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see them in the glass reflection. 2 middle-aged women, well-dressed, leaning close like the words might shatter if they said them too loud. "She was devastated," the second whispered. "And now all this legal drama. I'd cut my sister off too." They didn't notice me. I didn't speak. I walked out with my coffee, untouched. Vera was rewriting the narrative again. I sat on a park bench a few blocks down, heart pounding. My fingers trembled as I unlocked my phone and pulled up her social media. There, just beneath a black and white photo of her holding a candle at some fundraiser, was the caption, "Grieving doesn't stop just because the world moves on. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down." Comments flooded the post. "You're so strong, Vera." "Your sister should be ashamed." "God only gives pain to his strongest angels." I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. There had never been a pregnancy, no miscarriage, no grief. Just a story crafted at the perfect time to turn me into the villain. Back home, I collapsed onto the couch, phone still in hand. A new message lit up my inbox. Anonymous. No subject, just a link. I hesitated, then clicked. It opened to a video interview, Vera, in soft lighting, hair pulled back, her voice syrupy calm. "Family means being there," she said, "even when some of us can't carry life forward. Even when some lash out, it's pain speaking. I forgive her, I always have." The anchor nodded solemnly. "You're referring to your sister?" Vera smiled, eyes glossy. "We don't say names in our home when it brings hurt." I paused the video. She was good. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. The message was loud and clear. I was bitter, broken, jealous. And she? The sainted victim who forgave even those who tried to destroy her. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table and sat in silence. A memory surfaced. A year ago, Vera had asked me over dinner what IVF treatments typically cost. She'd acted curious, supportive even. "In case I know someone who needs it," she'd said. I didn't think much of it then. Now I knew she wasn't researching support. She was building a weapon. By late afternoon, I was in Janice's office. I told her everything about the fake miscarriage, the bakery gossip, the interview. Janice listened, arms crossed. "You want to respond publicly?" "I want to respond intentionally," I said, "but not on their level." She nodded slowly. "Then make sure your truth can't be twisted. And when you speak, don't speak to them. Speak to everyone else." I went home and changed into something simple. Sat at my kitchen table, propped up my phone. I didn't post the video, not yet. But I recorded it. All of it. The gaslighting, the dinner, the inheritance, the photos, the lies. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I spoke like someone who had nothing left to protect, because that's what happens when your family cuts you off and then tries to cut you down. I stared into the lens and said, "You want a story? I'll give you the truth, every damn word of it." Melis's house always smelled like eucalyptus and acrylic paint, comfort and creation in equal parts. That Monday morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows, like someone upstairs had finally decided I deserved warmth. Outside, the city was starting to move again. Inside, the air was still. Calm. Until Lucas wandered into the room. He was supposed to be sketching for his art project, but the 10-year-old had inherited his mother's knack for distraction. He set Vera's old tablet on the table beside me and tapped the screen. "Is this still your aunt?" he asked, his voice casual, already bored. I looked over, and everything changed. The video wasn't grainy. It was crisp, clear enough that I saw every muscle twitch in Vera's face as she rehearsed her lines in front of a mirror. "To family," she said, holding a wine glass as if performing. "To legacy, and to those who can actually continue it." She paused, smirked, then delivered it again, sharper this time. "Some of us are just infertile burdens." And then, she laughed. "That'll hit just right," she said to someone off camera. "She'll fold like always." I didn't speak. Couldn't. Melis walked in just as I was hitting pause. Her gaze flicked to the screen. "Is that?" I nodded. She didn't ask how we got it. She just took the tablet, plugged in a flash drive, and copied the file. "You don't bury that," she said. "You plant it." By noon, I was sitting at her kitchen island, staring at the post I'd drafted. Caption: "For those who believed her, for those who questioned me, here is what truth sounds like, rehearsed." I tapped post. The video spread faster than I expected. Views climbed by the thousands within hours. The comment section became a battlefield of disbelief, rage, apologies from strangers who'd once judged me without knowing a thing. The private messages were worse and better. Women, men, saying, "I've been erased like that too." It didn't fix anything, but it told me I wasn't alone. By that evening, local media picked it up. A news anchor read my words on air with a solemn tone, a clip of Vera's performance muted behind her shoulder. There were no statements from Vera, no rebuttals, just silence. And then I made one more post. "I'm donating my inheritance share to the Carolina Hope Foundation. They help women struggling with fertility access treatments, support, and community. I may not carry a child, but I'll help others carry hope." I didn't wait to see how it landed. I didn't need to. That night, Vera called. I watched the screen light up. I let it ring. Then I turned my phone off and stepped outside. The air was cooler than I expected. I walked 2 blocks to the small park with the stone fountain and sat on a bench beneath a crepe myrtle tree. Across the path, a woman pushed a stroller, humming softly to the baby inside. I watched them for a while. Then I whispered, to myself, not to anyone else, "You don't need blood to leave a legacy. You need courage." 2 weeks had passed since the video. Charleston's air felt different now. Lighter somehow, like the city itself had exhaled. The bite of spring had softened into early summer warmth, and with it came a stillness I hadn't felt in years. No one from my family had said a word publicly. Vera, once the center of every family function and PR stunt, had gone radio silent. Sylvia hadn't called. Donovan hadn't even sent one of his infamous forwarded "thought of you" articles. But a few distant relatives had found the nerve to text. "Hope you're well. We're all praying for peace. Just know we love you, no matter what's being said." I read them once, then deleted them all. I didn't have the energy to entertain half-hearted concern. The only message that lingered was Sylvia's email. Long, filled with soft language. Carefully crafted phrases like, "I never intended harm," and "We all have our own perspectives." Not once did she say sorry. I closed the tab without replying. Later that week, I met Milas at her studio. The space smelled like fresh paint and lemon tea. We sat side by side, working on canvases. I wasn't painting anything real, just swipes of blue and green. But it felt like enough. I broke the silence. "Do you think this crack in me will ever close?" She didn't pause. "No," she said. But it'll be yours, not theirs. That stayed with me. The next morning, I drove to the old cemetery on the east side of town, the one where my grandmother was buried, the only person in my family who had ever truly seen me, asked how I felt, believed in what I wanted, even when it wasn't tradition. I knelt at her grave, ran my fingers across the carved letters of her name. I pulled a folded note from my bag and placed it beneath a smooth stone. You were the only one who ever made me feel like I was enough. Thank you for that one safe place. I didn't cry. I stood, brushed off my knees, and walked away. Not because I was healed, but because I finally understood where my story ended and theirs began. A few days later, I began volunteering at a women's health nonprofit. Quiet work, fulfilling. They asked if I'd like to lead a support group for women navigating infertility and identity loss. I said yes. It wasn't the legacy my family valued, but it was mine. At the end of our second session, a woman named Denise waited until everyone had left. She came up, wringing her hands a little. I just wanted to say, "You helped me feel seen." That single sentence did more for my spirit than 1,000 hollow apologies ever could. Later that night, sitting in my apartment, I thought about the girl I'd been, always hoping to be chosen, to be embraced, to be invited to the table. And I realized I had built my own, not out of spite, but out of necessity and love. I may never win back my family, but in truth, I hadn't lost them. They were never really mine to begin with. I found something better, myself. In the end, I didn't walk away with an apology or a seat at their table, but I did walk away with clarity. Sometimes the family we're born into isn't the one meant to raise us into who we're supposed to be. I found strength not in their acceptance, but in my own voice. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unchosen, you're not alone. You don't need anyone's permission to start over. You just need your own. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved to find yourself? Or are you still holding on to something that's keeping you small? Drop a comment and let me know. Share your story. And if this story touched your heart, hit the like button, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't connect with it, I'd still love to know why, and where you are in your own journey. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might speak directly to your soul.